Senior editor for The Hill. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks so much, Pedro.
Joining us now is George Farah. And Mr. Farah, looking at the debates, the presidential debates that have taken place, the vice presidential debate that's taken place, tonight's debate, how would you gauge their effectiveness as far as what's communicated to the American public?
Well, I think it's fair to say these have been some of the worst debates in presidential debate history. Despite the Commission on Presidential Debate's efforts to have an unprecedented and creative and dynamic format, because the campaigns have negotiated and controlled these actual events prior to the debates being held, we are seeing extremely stilted, stultifying debate that are failing to inform the American people as they deserve to be.
What do you mean by arrangements?
Well, since the Commission on Presidential Debate has seized control of these events from the League of Women Voters, and they did so in 1988, the Republican Democratic parties have met behind closed doors in a law office in Washington every 4 years, and lead negotiators for the campaigns meet and draft a secret contract, a memorandum of understanding that dictates precisely how these debates will be structured, from the heights of the podiums to who gets to participate to precisely the nature of the format. And as a result, the Commission merely implements this contract, and we get a debate that's not pushed by a nonpartisan entity, that's not challenging to the candidates, but rather a debate that's been designed by the candidates to prevent them from making any mistake and to make sure they have predictable questions to answer.
And what would a nonpartisan entity do that's different than what we're seeing now?
Well, from 1976, Pedro, until 1984, the League of Women Voters hosted these presidential debates. And they were genuinely a nonpartisan organization. It was a courageous women's group that's respected from people all over the political spectrum, left, right, center. And they fought aggressively on behalf of the American people to ensure that the presidential debates genuinely served the public interest. 1980, John B. Anderson, a Republican congressman, bolted his party, ran as an independent for the President of the United States. President Jimmy Carter refused to debate Anderson. The League said, you know what, Mr. President, too bad. Then they pushed for Anderson's inclusion in the presidential debate, and there was a debate with a third-party candidate that was watched by 55 million people. 4 years later, the League of Women Voters proposed aggressive moderators to the debate. Walter Mondale, Ronald Reagan vetoed 68 of the moderators that had been proposed by the League. They didn't want difficult questions. The League said this is outrageous. They issued a press release accusing the candidates of totally abusing the process, and they forced the candidates to accept aggressive moderators. 4 years later, the candidates negotiated the first ever secret contract, a 12-page memorandum of understanding. They handed it to the League of Women Voters. They said, implement this document. The League said, this is outrageous. We're not going to implement some sort of contract. Again, refused to hold the debate, issued a press release saying they will, quote, not be an accessory to the hoodwinking of the American people and allow the candidates to perpetrate a fraud on the American people, and they withdrew sponsorship. The Commission stepped in, and ever since, they have been a compliant moderator that does whatever the candidates want.
Has there ever been a release of the documents from previous presidential debates, including information from these that have taken place?
Well, we were fortunate when I wrote the book in 1996 and 1992 to get copies from a whistleblower of the actual contracts, and we were stunned at what we saw. These had never been made released before, and they had specific stipulations in the contract that said the candidates cannot talk to each other. This is supposed to be debate, and they're prohibiting the candidates from talking to each other. The candidates will only participate in debates sponsored by the Commission, so again, allowing the Commission to have a monopoly over these forums. In 2000, the contract was kept secret, but in 2004, we held a press conference, we issued press releases, we were backed by 60 civic groups, 35 newspapers, and on the eve of the presidential debates, the Kerry and Bush campaigns released the contract. This year, Pedro, this year, despite our best efforts, we are unable to force the Obama and McCain campaigns or the Commission on Presidential Debates to make this document secret, to make this document public. When I asked them, can you please make this document public? This is a critical document. They say, I'm sorry, Mr. Farah, this is a private matter. These are candidates that are asking for our vote. They have tens of millions of taxpayer funds. The Commission's a tax-exempt organization, and they're claiming the rules that are governing our most watched political event is a private matter. We think it's a public matter, and we're outraged at the lack of transparency.
We're talking about the presidential debate format with George Farah. He is the executive director of Open Debates, also has a book on this issue called No Debate, How the Republican and Democratic Parties Secretly Controlled the Presidential Debates. You can talk to him about the debate format that's employed by one of these lines. If you support Senator McCain, it's 202-737-0001. If you support Senator Obama, 202-737-0002. And if you support others, 202-628-0205. Is there an ideal format in your mind as far as debates go?
Well, no. I mean, there's not. These are difficult things. Political scientists disagree over what's the best way to push for the candidates to get off their script and actually have some sort of debate discourse. But we have a couple suggestions. First, we don't know why we ration debates. I mean, why are there only 3 debates this election season in the general election? We had 13 in the Democratic primary alone. They were watched by tens of millions of voters. different types of formats, YouTube formats, candidates asking each other questions. Second of all, we would like a diversity of formats, again, with more than 3 debates, and we would have some original concepts, like the first ever youth debate, because it's hard to force young people to turn out. Young people ask unpredictable questions. We would have a town hall format that it was a genuine town hall format. What I mean by that is, rather than require the town hall audience to submit their questions in advance on index cards and give them to the moderator, we'll have the audience ask whatever's on their mind. No one has any idea what they're going to ask, not filtered by the moderator. We would have single moderator debates, which is what you're going to see tonight. But instead of having the candidates limited response times, and instead of having the moderator pose the questions, how about having the candidates ask each other questions? Let's force some confrontation and get them off their script. Whatever format will force the candidates to have to think on their feet in front of tens of millions of voters would be effective. And lastly, we've been pushing for the kind of debate format that will have not just journalists, but civic leaders, religious leaders, artists, business leaders, labor unions posing questions to the candidates. One of the most fascinating debates this year was Rick Warren's debate, where he asked Obama and McCain questions like, how do you define evil? What does it mean to be rich? And these were actually interesting questions that forced the candidates to have to think on their feet.
Should third-party or independent parties be involved in this?
We think that any third-party candidate that is, again, on enough state ballots to win electoral college majority, that the majority of Americans want to see in debate, ought to be included. What right does a private corporation, created by the Republican and Democratic parties, financed by Anheuser-Busch, Philip Morris, and other corporate sponsors, to say to the American people, I'm sorry, you want to see this candidate, but we're going to shut him out? And that would only result in a small number of candidates. Since 1988, only 3 third-party candidates have actually met that standard: Ross Perot, Ralph Nader, and Pat Buchanan. So we wouldn't have hundreds of candidates on stage, which is what the commission will tell you if they lower their standards.
West Brookfield, Massachusetts. You're on with George Farah. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Morning.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, first of all, back during the, I think one of the most famous presidential debates that we ever had in our nation's history were the Lincoln-Douglas debates. And that was back when there was actually a debate, you know, where the two guys, as you just suggested, and I applaud you for that, posed questions to one another, and actually the other guy didn't have any chance of knowing what softballs were going to be lobbed. They couldn't pre-prepare, you know, their responses. Having the candidates actually pose questions to one another and debate issues would actually be refreshing, I think, for the American public, as well as informative. But based on the fact that we now have a system where there is a moderator, why is it that, and why can't, I know that there are far fewer conservative news people out there than there are liberals, but why can't once in a while we have a conservative moderator? How come all of the moderators always have to be liberals?
Well, I'll address 2 of your points. The first point about the Lincoln-Douglas debate, I agree with you, sir. It would be fantastic to have a Lincoln-Douglas type debate. These guys had 8 debates. There were no moderators. They were talking at length, unscripted, with brilliant answers and answering each other's questions. It was confrontational. It was revealing. It was decisive. The difference, though, is that television has taken over our political process. There were no TVs when Lincoln-Douglas ran the debates. There were no campaign handlers making sure their candidates looked good on TV. And in 1960, when the first televised presidential debate took place, Nixon lost. He didn't have any makeup. He was inarticulate. And John F. Kennedy won. Ever since, these campaigns have done everything they can to control these debates, to sanitize them and make sure their candidates don't make a mistake. And as long as the campaigns are exerting that control and can, through this Commission on Presidential Debates, which we think is a fraudulent organization, we're never going to see Lincoln-Douglas type debates. With respect to the moderators are been proposed by the commission and ultimately agreed to by the candidates. So you will not ever have a moderator at the commission that the candidates don't approve it. So if you're unhappy with the nature of the moderators, and as am I, you'll never see a Tim Russer type figure ever asking questions in a presidential debate. It's because the candidates have agreed to that moderator.
Tonight's debate will focus on the economy and domestic policy. It will run for 90 minutes with no commercial interruptions. It will be moderated by Bob Schieffer of CBS. There will be a 2-minute answer and a 2-minute opponent response to the debate, as well as allowing 5 minutes for open discussion. There will be 90-second closing statements. The candidates will be seated with the moderator at this time, and Senator McCain will go first. Does being seated differ than standing at podiums or being allowed to roam as far as a town hall format is concerned?
Yes, you know, these small little devices that are forced to make the candidates have a little bit of a different kind of format actually are effective. The commission needs to be praised for one thing this year. They pushed for this 5-minute discussion period, which is unprecedented. And the purpose was, as a result of our criticism and the criticism of other civic groups, to actually have the candidates get off their script and have a discussion, have an actual debate. The first debate, it was not very successful. If you will recall, Jim Lehrer kept telling John McCain, talk to Obama, don't talk to me. They were uncomfortable with the nature of it. Also, we don't know what other restrictions have been placed on that 5-minute discussion period because they refused to make the contract public. But tonight, I think because